The something point 10 patches are usually big, right? Like 13.10, which brought a whole ass ADC item rework, or 12.10, which was the durability patch, if you remember that. It didn't last, but the important bit is that those were pretty sweeping changes that affected the game as a whole pretty substantially. 14.10 is another one of these big patches, which aside from the usual balance changes to some champions, brings in a ton of changes to items and runes, some of which can be a little bit confusing, you know, a tiny tad disorienting. But I'll do my best to cover them in a quick, impartial way for this video. Mostly impartial. My god, what the fuck did I do to Shieldbow? If you want to test these sorts of changes ahead of time in the PvE yourself, well, you're all out of luck. Better have fun having every single click get delayed by 180 milliseconds or more. That's usually how bad it gets for me at least. But there's this neat thing called Gear Up. Essentially, it's a service designed to reduce and stabilize your ping while playing games. If you live far away from the servers, and you probably do because I've never seen PvE footage below 100 ms, or you just live in a place with bad internet infrastructure, Gear Up can not only stabilize those fluctuations and make the game's latency a little more predictable, but also reduce them by 50 or even 80 ms. That's a lot of milliseconds in League's netcode. And it does so by rerouting your network to their dedicated pathway, which will optimize your connection more and more the farther away you live from the server. TSM approved too, so no worries about Vanguard having a fit just because you can't take the lag spikes anymore. So if you want to reduce your latency and make the PvE a more pleasant experience, you can find a link to Gear Up in the description or in the pinned comment below. Let me know if you had good results and how much you managed to lower it. Now let's get into the patch, starting with another ADC item rework. Feels like we get one of those every other month. This time though, it's partially a revert. In the remote, Jurassic times of League's history, crit items used to give 25% crit chance. Wild, I know. I had to sort through some historical files at my local library to find documentation on it. Now, in 14.10, they'll go back to that, allowing crit ADCs to spike earlier and scale better into the late game by building a more defensive item while retaining 100% crit chance at full build. In theory, at least. Because if it seems too good to be true, I'll let you know that Stormrazor got murdered. It died for your sins. Remember to pray for it every time you build Infinity Edge and get 80 AD from it. And give it a visit in Arena from time to time. And you'll be pressed to find any item that gives AD, attack speed and crit chance all in one. In fact, I don't think there are any left, since they took away the AD from attack speed crit items, and the crit items that do give AD give no attack speed. So if you're a Yone or Yasuo main, please don't do it, it will get better soon. Azir has been in this boat for a while, but when some of the most popular champions in solo queue are at a similar win rate, there's no way they won't get some compensation buffs. Especially because their only silver lining, their only saving grace in their itemization, Zeal, got nerfed as well. Just so we don't spend the whole video talking about ADCs, again, I'll skim through some of the more major changes. Items have no crit, attack speed and AD all in one, and no crit item has lifesteal. Lord Dominik's doesn't give bonus damage based on the target's HP difference anymore, Bloodthirster gives an overshield again, Mercurial Scimitar gives lifesteal and no crit, and Navori changed its legal name and now works on attack instead of on critical hits, and gives no AD. There's also this new item, Yuntal Wild Arrows, but it's just an AD crit item that's gonna be really good on Jhin, probably like Draven and Caitlyn or something. Not much of note here, except when you check the damage in game and it's killed like 5 people on the passive alone. It's pretty good. And one last thing, Berserker Greaves now build into Zephyr at level 15, which will give stacking movement speed per auto, so ADCs will be scaling to the moon this patch. As for mages, there's less stuff, but what is there is pretty cool. Brand and Zara mains must be creaming themselves over Blackfire Torch making a return. It's a mana item that applies a burn on ability hits, and the more targets are affected, the more bonus AP it gives you, up to 20% for 5 champions. And it could go to 24% if you're burning a Drake or a Herald in a fight. Yes, percent. It's a percentage. I started writing this script shortly before the patch dropped, but I already knew it would be kinda busted. Did I expect it to bring Karthus bot lane back from the dead? Hell no, but it feels nice to be right sometimes. But if you don't want to play a DPS or dot mage, Luden's just got a nice change as well. Now, it will only proc at max charges and deal significantly more damage when it does. I'm not sure why the old Luden's is gone when this is the direction they wanted it, but welcome back I guess. Let's talk a bit about tank items then. Remember when Red realized that giving Titanic Hydra AD based on your bonus HP was a bit much? Well, here's an item that does exactly that, but without the wave glare. Of course, you can just build both together and have a lot of synergy, and maybe Dr. Mundo will go back into a playable state, much to the displeasure of, everyone really. By the way, Ghost is getting a duration nerf, and the cooldown is longer, so have fun Darius mains. It's also good to note that Randuins will no longer have the rock solid passive, and will instead give more armor and a stronger slowing active, so Frozen Heart is now the only item with rock solid. But enough about items, because there's so many small balance passes on a lot of stuff, and I'll slowly descend into insanity if I try to cover them all. So let's just skip to runes, which I think are a lot more important in the grand scheme of things. Lethal tempo? Gone. It's done. Clean shot to the forehead. Now I get it, it's very sad, it was a cool rune to play with, but looking at the positives, I guess it did eat up a lot of the options for most ADCs and auto attack champions in general. It was the single best sustained DPS option for most of them, and now with it sleeping with the fishies, we'll be seeing a lot more variety on keystones for auto attackers. Hail of Blades, despite giving a little less attack speed and ranged now, is looking like a pretty decent burst option. PTA, Fleet Footwork, and even Conqueror should be good on melee skirmishers and some ADCs. As much as I'll miss it, I guess it's healthy that it's gone now. Speaking of PTA, by the way, it's no longer a single target burst rune, it works more similarly to Conqueror now, where getting the 3 autos in will apply a damage boost to you for the rest of the fight, rather than apply a damage vulnerability to your target. It's pretty good on Yasuo, not sure about Yone and Azir, but it should be pretty decent as well. You know what I won't be missing? Predator. Nobody will miss it except for those unloved people who played Singed Mid and roamed level 3 in Season 11, I think? I know what you are. There's also been quite a few changes to secondary runes, like Overheal being removed for an out-of-combat sustain one, Futures Market being removed for a 6% refund instead, and Legend Tenacity being replaced with Legend Haste. The name says it all. Just stacking ability haste over the course of the game, up to 15 total. Maybe Perk Mage Z with Conqueror is back on the menu, and it's looking pretty good on Silas as well. In Genius Hunter though, I do not believe they took it out. Seriously, it was such an underappreciated rune, and removing it because it was underutilized will never sit right with me. Especially when item haste is already so hard to come by. They didn't even replace it with anything, which kinda sucks, and they even nerfed Relentless Hunter to add insult to injury. Overall, how are we feeling about this patch, chat? I think there's lots of changes here, and some stuff that spices up the game for everyone. But in all seriousness, it just seems like too much attention went to ADC changes and not enough to overall systems. Season 14 itself dropped a lot of big stuff on us, like Void Grubs and removing Mythics, so I guess I expected something bigger for 14.10, since this is usually the biggest patch of the year. One big criticism I have though. I distinctly remember Riot mentioning in the devlog about removing Mythics that they wanted to drive away some power from items and focus more on champion kits, like really having you play the character instead of using them as a vehicle for item damage. And yet, look at where we are, with Ahri building Malignance and Lichbane to rely on as few skill shots as possible, or Zed's best build being Eclipse into Cycle Sword, which allows him to miss skill shots and deal point-and-click damage with items instead. Maybe I'm just a biased mid-main, but I don't like it when I dodge everything and die, then I look at the enemy damage chart and it's like 40% damage from items. Brand Jungle is now being carried by Blackfire Torch, and don't even get me started on Karthus with that thing. And the last footnote. Azir got 50% on-hit damage on his soldier autos a while ago, and those autos actually count as abilities. Now, Riot's made a change to it, where that ability will be blocked by stuff like Jax's Counter-Strike, Shen's Block, or Nila's thingy. Pretty sure Teemo Blind works as well. It's also been made clear that his ult will count as terrain when it's hit by Qiyana ult or Ornn's E, but it's also a projectile, blocked by Yasuo's Windwall and Samira's parry. Basically, Azir has these Schrödinger interactions where it's coded as two things at the same time, and it will be interpreted on a case-by-case basis in the least charitable way possible. Soldier autos are just regular auto attacks, until they hit a Yorick Ghoul, in which case they are now AoE abilities and deal massively reduced damage. Same for Malzahar Voidlings. They are considered AoE autos until that becomes convenient for Azir, in which case they are actually AoE abilities. Either way, the Pigeon loses. Throw him a bone, Riot. MSI is already over and his win rate is lower than Corki's. Anyway, that's all I have for now. Thanks for sitting through my rant about why I hate the way Riot balances my main. And also, thank you for 5,000 subs. I never thought this number was reachable, blah blah blah, everyone says the same thing, and I have absolutely nothing special prepared for it other than my genuine gratitude. Like seriously, thank you. You know what? Here, have a cool little stamp. This is your achievement. Consider making that big number even bigger if you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you on the next one. Cheers.